The fuse was lit with a confusing, seemingly contradictory political statement. The result? A shocking $100,000 H-1B visa fee, an economic strike aimed directly at the core labor model of Silicon Valley. We're witnessing a political firestorm that triggered internal conflict across the administration's base, prompting headlines of a civil war while simultaneously cornering the billion-dollar corporate lobbying machine. The question before us is this: was this chaos a political meltdown, or was it a calculated masterstroke designed to trap the most powerful economic interests in the country? Stay with us as we break this down in our in-depth discussion right here on News Focus Podcast. And if you find our reporting valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to support our channel. We truly appreciate it.
That framing is so important. I mean, it's really essential because the last week has been one of the most unpredictable periods in recent political memory.
Absolutely.
We saw this instantaneous, intense confusion among longtime political supporters. It was triggered by what looked like a dramatic shift in core policy. But as our sources are revealing that confusion, it was likely the intended first move in a much larger, much higher stakes game.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's begin the narrative at that precise moment the confusion started. The president floated the idea of expanding skilled visas. Now, to the casual observer, yeah, this might sound like a minor policy adjustment.
It's a small tweak.
Exactly. But for anyone who's been tracking the consistent rhetoric of the last decade, I mean, the rhetoric on job protection, on immigration reform, this was an immediate, jarring contradiction.
It was a bombshell.
It appeared to signal a sudden flip-flop on a foundational campaign promise, which was, prioritizing and protecting American jobs.
And it was more than just a contradiction. For many in the base, it felt like a perceived betrayal.
The betrayal.
Yeah, and this is why that strategic interpretation is so critical to understanding what happened next. Insiders are suggesting this public comment, this apparent softening of his stance. It wasn't a mistake.
So not a gaffe.
Not a gaffe at all. It was an intentionally lit fuse. It was designed really to achieve a very rapid, a very measurable reaction that would set the political stage for the deeper action that was actually already underway.
And that shockwave, it hit the America First base instantly and violently. Can you describe the scale of that initial reaction for us?
The reaction was nothing short of explosive. Social media platforms, particularly the ones favored by the base, they imploded.
Just lit up.
Completely. Comment sections, forums, they erupted with messages of disbelief, of anger. Conservative news outlets, independent commentators, they immediately started running emergency streams to try and analyze what on earth was happening. And the feeling was, it was uniform. Supporters felt blindsided, they felt deeply confused, and they felt fundamentally unsure whether the administration still held its core commitment against H-1B abuse.
So this one phrase sent these profound shockwaves through the entire political movement.
The entire movement, instantly.
And the speed with which this policy reference just metastasized into headlines screaming, MAGA Civil War. It was stunning.
It was.
This wasn't just, typical political grumbling. This felt like a serious public fracturing.
And that internal rift, which was, as you said, captured by headlines as a civil war, that was genuine. It was a real schism. We saw hashtags like hashtag no more H-1Bs, hashtag protect American workers. They immediately started to surge.
Right.
But what's so fascinating, if you look closer, is the internal factional split that this exposed. This wasn't just one homogenous group panicking. It was two distinct wings of the movement colliding in public.
Okay, that's interesting. Detail those wings for us. What were the specific ideological lines being drawn here?
Well, on one side, you had the core nationalist worker-focused wing. This is the segment that believes very strongly that immigration, especially temporary work visas, undercuts the wages of domestic labor.
The economic populists.
Exactly. For them, the flotation of this idea was an absolute violation of the promise to put the American worker first. So their reaction was primarily, panic and anger.
And the other side?
On the other side, you had a smaller, more economically libertarian wing.
Yeah.
Maybe more attuned to big business interests. They were cautiously trying to rationalize the move.
How so?
They were suggesting, well, maybe it's a necessary step for high-skilled growth, that kind of thing. And this, of course, led to these incredibly heated, very public arguments between longtime allies over what the president really intended.
So you have this intense underlying emotion, panic, anger, a deep sense of disbelief. And you said it yourself, the core question supporters were asking was, Had the massive corporate donor groups finally won?
Yes.
Had they finally pulled the administration away from its core populist agenda?
That emotional chaos, that immediate internal split, that is the absolute key to understanding the theory that this was a strategic trap.
Often called political jujitsu.
That's the term those close to the administration use, political jujitsu.
All right, let's dedicate some serious time to this strategic trap concept because it's counterintuitive. How does manufacturing internal chaos, which, usually spells political weakness, how does that translate into leverage?
It's all about how you frame it. The leverage is created by intentionally aligning your initial public statement with what the special interest groups desperately want to hear.
So you give them what they want, or you seem to.
You seem to. Big tech, corporate lobbyists, they've been relentlessly pressuring the administration to relax immigration controls, specifically the H-1B caps, so they can access cheaper labor.
Of course.
So the president floats this idea, and in doing so, he gives the lobbyists this false sense of hope.
Okay.
And then, crucially, he sits back and he watches the predictable, fierce reaction from his own political base.
So the base's reaction is the actual policy tool here. It's not a bug, it's a feature.
It's precisely the tool. That eruption, that massive, undeniable, visceral backlash from millions of voters, it becomes immediate, politically potent leverage. The chaos isn't just chaos, it's functional, it's ammunition.
Okay, so you have this ammunition. How is it then fired back at those corporate interests?
Well, it provides the administration with a bulletproof shield. So when the administration goes back to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or to the major tech company donors, the very groups demanding these cheaper labor policies, they can point directly to the intense political crisis they all just witnessed.
So the message becomes...
Look, my base will not accept this. I simply cannot risk the 2026 and 2028 elections by prioritizing your low-wage labor demands over the American worker. The outcry makes the policy they want politically toxic. It becomes impossible to implement.
So, in effect, he weaponizes the populist sentiment against the corporate demand structure.
He does.
The public infighting actually serves to intensify his negotiating position, not weaken it.
Okay.
But, this seems incredibly risky. You're relying on the predictable rage of your own supporters.
Oh, it is unconventional. It's very high risk.
Yeah.
But it is consistent with a strategy of prioritizing voter demands over donor demands. That internal division, which the press, gleefully labeled a civil war, it becomes the absolute proof he needs to push back on that corporate pressure.
The louder the base erupts.
The stronger his position becomes to maintain a hard line against cheap foreign labor.
Okay, so if that public comment was the fuse, let's now talk about the bomb. The bomb that was already ticking beneath the surface.
Yeah.
Because while the base was furiously debating whether the administration had shifted course, the administration had already rolled out a policy that constitutes, really, a financial declaration of war against the corporate labor model. We are talking about the stunning $100,000 H-1B visa fee.
Implemented via regulatory change earlier in November of 2025.
Exactly.
And you're right to call it a declaration of war. This fee wasn't just a policy adjustment. It was an economic hammer blow.
Right.
It fundamentally alters the cost calculus for every single major multinational corporation that relies on the high-volume use of these temporary work visas.
So when this rule officially appeared...
The immediate reaction from corporate America was total panic.
Let's break down the mechanics of this because it's important. For decades, corporations have paid, relatively minimal administrative fees.
A few $1,000s sometimes.
Just a few $1,000s for an H-1B worker. And that enabled them to hire, yes, some specialized labor, but often it was used for entry-level work at wages far below the market rate for American citizens.
That's the key.
So what does a jump to $100,000 per worker do to that model?
It completely implodes the profit incentive. It evaporates overnight.
How so?
Well, think about it. The entire business model of, outsourcing or replacing American workers, it relied on a net labor cost reduction.
Sure.
So if a company saves, say, $50,000 a year on a foreign worker's salary compared to an American counterpart, but now it has to pay a $100,000 fee up front.
The savings are gone.
They're immediately wiped out. Or worse, you actually incur a substantial loss on that hire for the first 2 years. This isn't reform. You called it financial warfare, and that's exactly what it is. It's designed to make the exploitative use of H-1B visas economically non-viable.
And what did that corporate panic actually look like in the C-suites? in the boardroom.
Two, it was immediate, according to our reports. Big tech executives were holding emergency closed-door calls.
I can imagine.
CEOs, chief operating officers, they realized that years of their cost-cutting strategies had been destroyed, literally overnight. Hiring managers were issuing these dire warnings of catastrophic consequences to their operational stability.
And this wasn't just hyperbole.
No, not at all. For companies that are running on razor-thin labor margins dependent on this specific pipeline of workers, it was a genuine existential economic threat.
And we need to clarify the regulatory mechanism used here because it's crucial. This fee wasn't passed by Congress.
No.
It was rolled out via regulatory change. Which agency enacted this, and why was that approach chosen over legislation?
So this type of significant fee change would typically originate from an agency like the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, through USCIS, or potentially the Department of Labor. It depends on the specific fee structure they're targeting.
And the method.
The method chosen was likely what's called an interim final rule, an IFR, or a similar fast-track regulatory process.
And the point of that is to avoid the slow, arduous process of congressional negotiation.
Exactly. That process would have allowed lobbyists months, if not years, to kill the proposal in committee.
So regulatory action was chosen for speed and to bypass the typical donor-influenced legislative blockades that we see in Washington.
Absolutely. It's a direct application of executive and administrative power. It's meant to implement structural change without needing legislative compromise. It's a very effective way to deliver on a core political promise when you're facing a very hostile lobbying environment.
And the corporate counteroffensive was, as you might expect, equally swift. They deployed the full power of that billion-dollar lobbying machine within, what was it, 48 hours?
Within 48 hours, the heavy hitters were mobilized instantly. You had the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is the powerful umbrella organization for American business. You had specialized tech coalitions like the IT Industry Council, multinational business associations. Their one singular goal was immediate judicial intervention,
Which culminated in this aggressive federal lawsuit.
challenging the new $100,000 fee almost instantly. Yes.
So what were the sophisticated legal arguments they deployed? I mean, beyond just claiming economic sabotage, what's the actual legal basis of their suit?
The legal teams challenged the administration on several grounds. First, they argued violations of the Administrative Procedure Act, the APA.
And what does that mean in plain English?
It means they claimed the agency just didn't have the statutory authority to set a fee this high. Or they argued the agency failed to follow the proper public notice and comment procedures that are required for such a drastic economic change.
I see. And the second argument?
Second, they claimed economic necessity. They argued that by crippling access to foreign labor, the government was causing irreparable harm to business continuity and to America's global competitiveness.
So they framed it legally, not as a policy preference.
Exactly. They framed it as an illegal attempt by the executive branch to disrupt the free market structure.
And so the narrative, it quickly transformed from a simple policy dispute into what people are calling a historic showdown.
It is.
This isn't just about visa numbers anymore. It's about power. It's the executive branch taking on the most powerful financial interests in the country.
That is the essential context. This is a full-scale institutional war. The lawsuit is a direct political weapon, and it's being wielded by financial elites who are trying to use the judiciary to nullify an executive action that threatens their core profitability.
It's a defining struggle.
It is a defining struggle over whether an elected government or corporate boardrooms get to dictate the American labor market and our economic direction.
To really understand the intensity of this corporate response and the administration's justification for such a massive fee, we have to deep dive into the historical context. I mean, the H-1B program and the decades of misuse that led us to this policy strike.
Indeed. And the president's consistent condemnation of H-1B abuse,
All right.
it's not new. This dates all the way back to 2015.
Right.
Since 2017, his rhetoric on this has been remarkably consistent and scathing. He hasn't just called for reform. He's called the system a scam, a racket, and a corporate loophole that's designed specifically to poison the U.S. job market by depressing wages.
So what were his consistent demands that led up to this point? What was he asking for all those years?
His core demands were always focused on eliminating the exploitative loopholes. He wanted a reform system that prioritized only the highest paid, highest skilled applicants, true specialists.
The best of the best.
The best of the best. And critically, he always insisted that H-1Bs should never, under any circumstances, be used to displace qualified American American workers.
Which is why the base's initial confusion was so intense.
Precisely.
Okay.
It clashed with nearly a decade of this fiery anti-abuse rhetoric.
Let's talk about the hard data, because this is really where the corporate narrative, the talent shortage narrative, it completely collapses. What are the specific numbers that illustrate the vast scope of the H-1B problem that would warrant this level of intervention?
The scale is immense.
Hmm.
And the statistics, they dismantle this whole notion that this is a niche program for a few geniuses. Right now, there are well over 700,000 H-1B workers employed inside the United States at any given time.
700,000.
Over 700,000. And while the program is continually advertised by lobbyists as being necessary for elite specialized roles that require unique expertise,
The best and brightest again.
the staggering reality is this. The data shows that approximately 80% of new approvals are actually for entry-level jobs.
80% for entry-level positions.
Amen.
That is definitive evidence that the program is being used for cost control and volume hiring, not specialized talent acquisition.
It's irrefutable. And furthermore, the reliance on specific pipelines is just overwhelming.
What do you mean by that?
Sources indicate that roughly 70% of those workers originate from India. Another 10 to 15% come from China.
Wow.
And this concentration isn't an accident. It highlights these highly efficient, high-volume recruitment pipelines that major multinational corporations and IT consulting firms have built
Did you what?
to ensure a constant supply of cheap, visa-locked labor.
But the deeper tragedy here, which so often gets lost in the financial and political debate, is the human cost. This system generates exploitation layered on exploitation. It harms both Americans and the foreign workers themselves.
It creates a profoundly unjust two-tier workforce. It's designed to do that.
Let's talk about the displaced American workers first.
Okay, so we have seen thousands of them. Workers who are forced out, often after years of loyal service to a company. And the specific, powerful anecdote you hear again and again is that many of them were forced to spend weeks, sometimes months, training their foreign replacements.
The very people who were about to take their jobs.
The very same people. They had to train them before they received their termination notices. I mean, this isn't just displacement. It's a profound corporate betrayal. And it's used as a financial mechanism.
And on the other side of that coin, you have the foreign workers. They're often portrayed as the beneficiaries of this system, but they're frequently just as exploited by the system they're entering.
That's such a crucial point. They are not simply freely mobile workers coming to America. They are effectively trapped in what critics have accurately labeled a visa dependency cage.
A dependency cage.
Yes. Their immigration status is tied directly to their specific employer. If they lose that job, they risk losing their status and facing deportation.
Which means they have no leverage.
None.
Yeah.
This severely restricts their ability to switch employers, to negotiate for higher salaries, or even just to report poor working conditions. This absolute leverage allows CEOs to maximize profits by ensuring this labor force is both cheaper and more compliant.
And this abuse, it's not just anecdotal, right? It is structural. It's been documented by federal agencies.
It is entirely structural. You can look at the Department of Labor's own records. They confirm this pattern of abuse.
How so?
Over the last decade alone, federal investigations targeting corporate misuse of the H-1B system, they've surpassed 175 major cases.
And what did those investigations find?
They targeted companies for systematic underpaying of foreign workers, sometimes paying them far less than the required prevailing wage. They found misclassification of job roles, and they found active, documented replacement of veteran American employees. The system, as it's currently structured, was really designed to benefit executive compensation and corporate margins, not the American economy, and not the true global specialist.
So in the midst of all this chaos, the base panicking, the corporations suing, Vice President J.D. Vance's intervention provided some crucial strategic reassurance. What was the impact of his clear, direct messaging?
Vance's public statement, it really served to stabilize the internal panic. He stepped in with just unmistakable clarity to reinforce that America First commitment.
And he took on the corporate defense directly.
He did. Critically, he pushed back forcefully against that standard corporate line, the idea that Americans aren't talented enough to fill these roles. He called that specific claim a deliberate lie manufactured by corporations addicted to cheap foreign labor.
So his intervention reinforced the administration's position that the solution lies in domestic investment, not foreign imports.
Exactly. His message was completely unambiguous. The priority is investing in and empowering American citizens who have been systematically overlooked and underpaid for decades. It's not about continuing to import entry-level workers at discounted rates.
So Vance's comments were essential.
They were, because they clarified for the base that the policy action, the $100,000 fee, was the true indicator of the administration's direction, not the rhetorical flotation that had caused the initial uproar. It signaled an unwavering commitment to structural economic protectionism.
Okay, let's return to the strategic heart of this deep dive. If the goal was always this $100,000 fee, how does that intense public backlash from your own base serve as functional leverage against corporate interests? We need to fully unpack this 5D chess theory.
The intense internal disagreement, it functions as undeniable political currency. That's the key.
What do you mean by currency?
Well, in the traditional Washington model, leverage comes from donor money, right? Or control over committee votes. In the populist model, leverage comes from the absolute loyalty and the vocal intensity of your voting base.
So when the corporate lobbyists inevitably show up at the White House, and they are, demanding a rollback of the $100,000 fee and a return to the cheap labor policies, the administration now has an immediate, non-negotiable rebuttal.
Precisely. They can point directly to the viral videos, to the social media implosion, to the headlines screaming civil war, and they can state very convincingly that implementing the policy the donors want is now politically impossible.
So the strategy, which has been deployed by populists in the past, uses the base's outrage as a kind of impervious shield against corporate pressure.
That's a perfect way to put it. The base in this scenario is not a liability. It is a permanent, functioning political barricade.
How does this leverage actually play out in real-time negotiations, with the power brokers in Washington on K Street?
The impact is profound because it removes the predictability that lobbyists rely on to do their jobs.
Right.
Traditionally, lobbyists expect that Republican administrations will, at the end of the day, prioritize the business community's economic interests, specifically, maximizing profits and ensuring those cheap labor pipelines. They expect that to win out over the concerns of working-class voters.
And this changes that calculus.
It completely changes the rules of engagement. By intentionally demonstrating the political toxicity of relaxing immigration standards, the administration can go to congressional leaders or powerful donors and say, look, I want to help you, but if I touch this, I risk my entire political coalition. I risk future elections. This effectively makes the policy a non-starter in a way that just, appealing to principle never could.
This marks a dramatic departure from that traditional political model. The old order relied entirely on the prioritization of donor interests.
That is the core conflict here. For decades, lobbyists and major donors expected presidents, both Republican and Democrat, to prioritize the funding needs and the economic demands of large corporations over the less financially organized demands of the voters.
And that structure maintained the status quo.
It did. It allowed these cheap labor models to flourish for decades.
And reports are suggesting the donor groups are privately furious, accusing the administration of governing by mob sentiment.
That is the language of entitlement, isn't it?
It is.
What they mean by mob sentiment is the unforgivable sin of prioritizing the demands of the voting base over the demands of wealthy contributors.
All right.
This populist approach threatens the established political equilibrium, where, large amounts of money traditionally bought specific policy outcomes. The accusation itself actually highlights the success of the strategy in shifting power away from those financial elites.
Let's delve deeper into Silicon Valley's panic. They've framed their lawsuit around talent shortages and economic necessity. What's the reality beneath all that legal maneuvering?
The reality is financial. It's not philosophical. The $100,000 fee exposed their true motivation. Their fear is the complete and permanent loss of the cheap, compliant, visa-dependent workforce that has been central to their financial structure for decades.
Because if they were truly importing elite, irreplaceable talent, as they claim, $100,000 would be a negligible cost for a worker who's earning, say, $300,000 a year.
Exactly. It would be a rounding error. If the workers were genuinely scarce, specialized, and highly compensated, the fee would be absorbed easily. It wouldn't even be a story.
So the panic proves the opposite.
It proves the opposite. The vast majority of these visa holders were being hired precisely because they were cheaper than their domestic counterparts. Internal memos, we know, flagged severe margin compression and major operational disruptions.
So the $100,000 fee threatens the very foundation of their profit margins.
Yes, which are often built on these cost-cutting measures that rely on suppressing labor costs through dependency.
So the core threat isn't losing talent. It's losing the leverage that the visa dependency cage provides. It's losing the ability to dictate terms to a trapped labor force.
It's entirely about control and finance. They relied on a regulatory loophole to shield their labor pool from normal market forces.
And the $100,000 fee.
It's the blunt force trauma that reintroduces market reality. It compels them to pay prevailing competitive wages to Americans or face these prohibitive costs for foreign hiring. That level of mandated structural change is why they reacted with a federal lawsuit almost immediately.
This is not a policy skirmish.
No,
Right.
it is an existential battle for their business model.
So as we analyze the debris field left by this week-long political earthquake, we really have to frame this dispute as what it is: a struggle for economic sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
The defining question at the heart of this confrontation is fundamental. Who holds the power to shape the future of the American workforce? Is it the citizens? Or is it the multinational corporations that treat the country like a limitless, cheap labor marketplace?
And this struggle, you have to remember, it impacts every single aspect of the American middle class. The stakes are just immense. They include national wages, job security, the stability of family finances, and ultimately, whether America maintains sovereignty over its own economic destiny. For decades, these structural mechanisms, these immigration loopholes, they allowed big tech and the Fortune 500 giants to dictate labor policy and suppress wages without any accountability.
And this crackdown, specifically the $100,000 fee, it directly challenges that decades-old power structure.
It does. This is a structural confrontation head-on. It is a struggle over who gets to shape America's economic future. Is it the working Americans who form the backbone of the economy and who have seen their wages stagnate for years? Or is it the boardroom elites who consistently prioritize shareholder profits above all else, regardless of the domestic social costs?
And the reaction from Silicon Valley confirms the severity of the threat they perceive.
It confirms their fear of losing the ability to operate without democratic accountability.
So by imposing a fee that makes exploitation economically unviable, the administration's endgame becomes clear. It's not just reform, is it? It's to fundamentally collapse the business model that relies on systematically undercutting American wages.
That is the key structural insight. The $100,000 penalty achieves what years of incremental regulatory tweaks could never do.
Wow.
It forces corporations to fundamentally alter their operational strategy. They are now economically mandated to hire domestically, to invest in American training, and to pay market wages to American workers. This action forces a monumental shift in the entire economic landscape.
And it moves the fight. It moves it from Washington's political stage, where lobbyists thrive, directly into the judicial arena, where the power of the base now provides executive cover. So let's review the final balance sheet of this chaotic week.
Okay.
On the one hand, you have the political movement supporting the administration. Initially, it appeared divided, chaotic. It attracted all those headlines of a civil war.
But that public, passionate backlash actually strengthened the administration's leverage against corporate influence.
Right.
Their political currency is now demonstrably higher. They can prove their base's commitment.
And for Silicon Valley and the corporate elite, what's on their side of the ledger?
Well, they look confident in their legal strategy, right?
Right.
They immediately launched a massive federal lawsuit. But the reality is that the $100,000 fee has shattered their cheap labor pipeline. Their entire profit model is now tied to a high-stakes, protracted legal battle. And the exploitative business model they relied upon is, at least for now, fundamentally under attack and economically unviable in the interim.
So whether this was a calculated 5D chess move from the start or just chaos that was expertly redirected, the outcome is unavoidable. The immigration and economic battlefield has been completely reshaped.
It has.
And perhaps the most powerful lesson here is the unconventional use of populist sentiment as a primary tool of executive policy defense.
A complex story indeed, and it really does reveal the deep structural fissures beneath our economic policy. And it shows surprising ways political power can be wielded against these entrenched institutional financial interests.
Thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
And thank you to you, our listener, for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you, and we appreciate you staying with us for this important discussion.
Given that multinational corporations and their lobbyists are already accustomed to dictating policy and have now deployed their primary weapon, the federal lawsuit, what is the next strategic maneuver corporate America will launch to defend its cheap labor model now that the legal route is well underway? Will they attempt to pressure Congress, seek internal regulatory capture, or maybe pivot to entirely alternative visa categories? Something for you to consider as this battle for economic sovereignty unfolds. That's all for this deep dive on News Focus podcast. We'll see you next time.